Is Keeley and Roy's relationship over? Can a headbutt ever be affectionate? What did Ted do with the photo Nate gave him as a gift? What can we expect in Season 3? We'll be covering these questions and more in this video. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. In this video we'll be looking at the final episode of Season 2 of Ted Lasso, called Inverting the Pyramid of Success. Let's jump straight in. The episode starts in a Soccer Saturday studio, with them reacting to the news of Ted's panic attack during the Spurs game. Jeff and Chris are sympathetic to Ted's problems, but George Cartrick, who was the manager at AFC Richmond before Ted, is scathing and shares some pretty outdated views about mental health. Then we cut to Ted in his kitchen and he's having a pretty depressing looking breakfast. He gets messages of support from Rebecca and Dr. Sharon before he tucks into his shredded wheat, which, for those who have never tasted it, pretty much tastes like cardboard. Then Ted gets a message from his ex-wife Michelle, also offering support. Note that he's still got her name saved as Michelle Lasso, despite the fact that she's most likely changed her surname after their divorce. Maybe he's not quite over it yet. He tries to draw her into a conversation, but it's clear that things are still a bit frosty between them. The way that text exchange almost turned into a chat, but didn't quite, is heartbreaking. I can see it from both of their sides. Ted wants to try and draw Michelle into a conversation and find out what's going on in her life, but I think Michelle doesn't want to do that, because it's hard to move on if you're still talking about your business with each other all the time. Ted has photographers waiting for him outside his flat when he leaves, and as he walks down the street he can tell everyone who's looking at him and has seen the story in the news. Beard is waiting for him with coffee, and when Ted is accosted by a passerby, Beard pretends he knows nothing about the story, despite the fact he has that day's paper in his back pocket. Ted has been offered support by a lot of his closest allies in this moment. Beard decides to offer Ted something else, the chance for some normality, by pretending he doesn't know about it. I think it's quite a nice thing for him to do, as Ted is going to be talking a lot about the story, so Beard is letting him have a break from it with him. Ted calls into Rebecca's office to drop off his usual biscuit delivery, and while he's there he gets offered the full support of Higgins, Rebecca and Keeley. When the others criticise Trent Crim for publishing the article, or talk about hunting down the anonymous source, Ted downplays it all, saying the article was all truthful and he can handle it. It's clear they're less convinced that Ted's on top of his game though, when Rebecca finds out that he's cooked her biscuits with salt instead of sugar. Sam arrives in the changing room to find a note from Edwin Akufo. There's also a box with Raja Casablanca's shirt inside that's got his name printed on it with a number 10 underneath it. The number 10 shirt would usually be given to a central playmaker, and Sam plays on the wings, but I think it's also probably the most sought after shirt in the team, so Edwin offering it to Sam is his way of telling him that he values him. Roy arrives in the changing room and demands to speak to Jamie Tart. From his tone it's clearly not going to be a friendly chat. They go into the boot room for some privacy, and before Roy has a chance to do or say anything, Jamie gets in first and tells Roy about how he confessed his feelings to Keeley at the funeral. He apologises, explains how he understands it was wrong, and actually does seem to be sorry for what he did. Jamie has really properly changed this season. He's still a bit of a tool, but nothing like the arrogant scumbag he was in the first season. Roy is incredibly frustrated by Jamie's apology, as it takes the edge off his anger enough to stop him from wanting to hurt Jamie, and he storms off instead. I think he would have preferred to have battered Jamie, but his moral code meant that he couldn't do it after Jamie had so obviously done the right thing by saying sorry, so he forgave him instead. Then we cut to Keeley's office, and she gets an email that gets her giddy with excitement, but we don't get to know why yet. On the training pitch, Ted offers an apology to the players for not telling them about his panic attacks, and leaving them to find out through the papers. The players are quick to tell Ted that they've got his back. They also are keen to find the person who leaked the story to the press and hurt them, which leads to a sheepish look from Nate, but Ted pours cold water on this and tells them to put their energy into their football instead. Keeley goes to see Higgins and tells him that the venture capitalists behind the Banter app have said they want to set Keeley up with their own PR firm. Keeley is excited, but wants advice because she's scared to tell Rebecca. She's worried Rebecca will think she's ungrateful for the opportunity she's given her if she leaves her job at Richmond now. Higgins reassures her that Rebecca will be pleased because it's a sign that she's done a good job as her mentor. Sam talks to his dad on the phone about Edwin Akufo's offer. He says that he'd be mad to turn it down, but he does seem like he's still not sure about it. His dad tells him to listen to messages from the universe. Then after he hangs up, he sees someone in the park playing in an Obisanya shirt alongside his friends wearing the shirts of Premier League teams. Is this the sign his dad was talking about? To me it looks like a group of lads playing football in the park, but Sam looks like it meant more to him than that. Roy tells Keeley about how he forgave Jamie in the boot room earlier in the day, and then she tells him about her opportunity to start her own PR firm. Roy's so happy that he picks her up and spins her around the kitchen. After the news is settled in, Roy makes a comment about how Keeley won't have time for him once she's the boss of her own company. Then Keeley gets sent over previews of her Vanity Fair article, and it doesn't include any of the pictures they took with Roy in. Keeley says she'll arrange for them to change the pictures around, but he tells her not to because she looks so good in the pictures they've used. Coming so closely after the comment about her not having time for him getting nudged out of the photo shoot is an example of him being sidelined, and Keeley getting all the limelight on her own. At the pub, Beard asks Ted whether he's going to confront Nate about leaking the story. Ted asks Beard why he thinks it was Nate, and Beard gives him a great look that says, "Come on." Ted concedes that it is indeed obvious who the leak was. Ted says that he wants Nate to come to him to apologise, but Beard tells him that that won't happen and he'll need to confront Nate about it if anything's going to be resolved. Keeley tells Rebecca her news, and they're both in floods of tears, but Rebecca's happy that Keeley's moving on with her new opportunity. As they're hugging, Rebecca glances down to her phone to see that Rupert has just bought West Ham United. which explains why he gave her back his shares in AFC Richmond, as it gets messy if you own shares in two clubs at the same time. Before the game, Roy tells the other coaches and Higgins that he would like some advice, even though it looks like it physically hurts him to ask. The Diamond Dogs agree to give him a one-time visitor's pass, and Roy tells him about how he wasn't included in the photos for Keeley's article, and it hurt his feeling. I love how he describes it as a single feeling, like everyone else has many feelings, but he has a robot that just has one inside him and he has to tend to it. Roy goes on to say that she looks so good in the photos that it would have been weird to have him in them too, and on top of that, Jamie Tartt has told her that he still loves her. After Roy's got all that off his chest, Nate says he has something to confess too, and he says it in this really funny, deeper than usual voice, like he's trying to be extra manly, but he just sounds a bit silly. He tells Roy that he kissed Keeley the other day. Roy tells him that it's fine, he knows about it and it was just a mistake, and that he shouldn't worry about it. Nate gets angry about Roy's understated reaction to his confession, and almost begs him to headbutt him. Bade offers to headbutt him instead if he wants, because he's clearly angry that he leaked the story to the press. But Ted wraps things up before things can get properly nasty, and we move on to the game. The game starts badly for AFC Richmond, with Brentford going in at half-time with a 2-0 lead. Ted describes the scene in the dressing room as a Renaissance painting portraying masculine melancholy, and he's not wrong. Ted asks for ideas, and Nate says they should abandon the false nine tactic and blames the players for getting it wrong. Ted disagrees and looks for other ideas. Roy suggests they ask the players, as they're the ones that have to put the plan into action on the pitch. The players all want to stick with playing the false nine system, and are confident they can use it to win the match. Then they all gather around Ted's believe sign, creating a lovely moment before they go out for the second half. Nate lingers in the dressing room before heading out, so Ted goes in to check in with him. Nate says he's okay, but anyone that's ever had a partner that's annoyed with them knows that kind of okay means things really aren't okay. Ted confronts Nate, asking why he's so angry with him. Nate tells Ted that he's made him feel important, then abandoned him. He talks about how Ted hasn't had any time for him, and then starts saying some really unpleasant things about how Ted doesn't belong there and should be back in Kansas with his son. Ted can see that Nate's hurt is real and apologises for not appreciating him enough. This is the exact kind of situation he spends so much of his time trying to avoid. He wants everyone to feel loved and accepted by him, but Nate slipped through the cracks somehow, maybe because he wanted more than he could reasonably expect from Ted. The game gets to the 80th minute and Richmond is still 2-0 down. Then Sam pulls one back, and we find out from the commentators that the other results mean that a goal will be enough to clinch second place and get them back to the Premier League. Jamie Tartt is brought down by the keeper in stoppage time, and the referee awards a penalty. He picks up the ball to take the penalty. He hasn't missed one all season. Then, as he's looking at the keeper, he has a change of heart and gives the ball to Danny Rojas and tells him that he's got this. Danny hasn't taken a penalty since the opening episode of the season, when he accidentally killed the club's mascot, Earl Greyhound. Thankfully, the club's new mascot, Macy Greyhound, is wearing a helmet, so it's protected if the penalty should go astray. The penalty goes in, Richmond get the draw they need, and they're back in the Premier League. Everyone goes bonkers, celebrating the win, apart from Nate, that is. He just walks off down the touchline, while everyone else jumps up and down on the middle of the pitch. Roy headbutts Jamie Tartt, but it's an affectionate headbutt, if such a thing exists, because he's done it so he can get all the bad feeling between them out of the way, and then they can embrace each other fully and enjoy the moment. It may seem like senseless violence to some, but I think I understand Roy's logic in this moment, and I think Jamie does too. And I think from Jamie's point of view, he'd rather have a sore nose than have the bad blood settle between him and Roy. Ted gets back to the dressing room on a high, but is quickly brought back down when he gets to his desk and sees his belief sign has been torn in half by Nate. You couldn't get a much clearer visual metaphor from Nate to show that he's no longer a part of this team. Ted knows it too. Sam is pulled away from the celebrations because Edwin Akufo wants an answer from him about his proposal to buy him from Raja Casablanca. Sam respectfully declines the offer because he thinks his time at Richmond isn't over yet. Edwin takes the news very badly and basically has a tantrum. He screams abuse at Sam after being so nice to him before, and then knocks over as many things as he can find on the way out of the training ground. It's a slightly over-the-top performance, but it's funny after him being so calm and collected up until now. Ted does his press conference after the game, and despite returning Richmond to the Premier League, the questions he faces are about his panic attacks. He talks openly about his personal struggles and the broader issue around mental health in sports. We don't hear what he says exactly, but it seems like Ted's not shying away from these difficult questions, and is using the situation to try and educate and improve the way mental health is dealt with in sport. Then Ted goes to see Rebecca in her office, and as they're talking, Sam turns up to say he's going to stay at Richmond. It's an awkward situation, as Sam doesn't know that Ted knows about his relationship with Rebecca. So on the surface, the discussion is about his footballing career, but we all know that he's also talking about him and Rebecca too. Sam does his funny thing where he turns to Ted and says he's chosen to stay not because of his feelings for him, but he's staying because of what's best for his personal journey. Rather perceptively, Ted works out that Sam's words were intended for Rebecca, not him. Ted bumps into Trent Krim outside the training ground and finds out that he's lost his job for revealing his source for the article about Ted's panic attacks. He says he wants to do something deeper, which might be a hint towards what he'll be doing in Season 3. Then we get to an epilogue section, where the time keeps jumping forward. First we go to 5 days later, where Keeley is packing up her office. Roy surprises her with the tickets to Marbella, where he's booked a 6-week holiday for them. Keeley says she can't go because she's busy setting up her new business. Roy takes the rejection badly and wonders if they're breaking up. Keeley reassures him that they aren't, but it does seem that they're drifting apart at this point. Then it's 3 weeks later, and Sam is picking up the keys for the premises for his new Nigerian restaurant. Then we jump to 2 months later, and there's a training session taking place on West Ham Stadium pitch. We see Rupert whispering in someone's ear. They've got grey hair. Oh, it couldn't. Yeah, of course, it's Nate. He's now the manager of West Ham United, setting up a perfect confrontation between him and AFC Richmond when they play each other in the Premier League next season. Season finales can be difficult to pull off because you've got to pull together all the loose strings that have been developed over the course of the season, still tell a satisfying story in the individual episode too, and set things up for the next season as well. It's a lot to pull off, and they can often end up feeling rushed or unsatisfying. This one didn't though. It did everything it needed to, while also providing a few surprises along the way. Going into the episode, it felt like the story about Ted's panic attacks could dominate the whole episode. I like the way that all the people you actually care about stood by him and offered him support, and the only people that were judgmental were people like George Hartrick and passers-by on the street. So the story, if anything, brought the team closer together, and Ted ended up with more support rather than less as a result of Nate leaking the story to the press. If Nate had hoped that leaking the story would ruin Ted's career, it seemed to do him no harm at all, other than create an unwelcome distraction for an important game. Being open about struggles with mental health isn't easy for anyone, but I hope Ted Lasso can act as an example of how anyone can be affected by these issues, and good people won't hold mental health problems against you. It was a bit of a surprise to see Keeley leaving AFC Richmond at the end of this season to start her own PR firm. While I think we'll still see plenty of her in the next season, it does see her career advancement is making it harder for her relationship with Roy. It's funny, because Roy's really supportive and excited for Keeley's new venture, but also seems to be worried that he's going to get pushed out too. I don't see why this has to be the case, but the final scene where she says she can't go on holiday with him did seem to suggest that things are not going well with them, particularly when they've already had several other episodes this season when there's been friction between them. So they finish the season still together, but things are clearly fraught. Sam choosing to stay means there's still hope for his relationship with Rebecca, even though she's still not ready to make a commitment to him. I'm pleased that he explained at the end that his decision to stay at Richmond was down to what was best for him, rather than anything to do with the potential for their relationship. It would be a shame if he turned down a great opportunity to progress his career, so he could wait around to see if Rebecca wanted to rekindle their romance. As a side note, Sam really should have used this interest from Edwin Akufo to negotiate a better contract. He could have at least doubled his wages from that situation if he played his cards right. After watching Nate's gradual change over the course of this season, in this episode we really saw him fully descend into being a horrible person. The halftime confrontation between him and Ted was quite sad really, as Nate obviously just wanted to be loved by Ted, and didn't feel like he'd been given the attention he wanted. If Nate had been paying attention more, he might have noticed that Ted's been battling his own demons this season, and hasn't had his eye on the ball as much as he might have had in the past. It's also clear that Nate saw Ted as a father figure, and a lot of his feelings towards Ted are perhaps more about the fact he wants more recognition from his father, which we saw he doesn't get in the few scenes we've seen with Nate and his dad on screen together. We knew Rupert was up to something with Nate when he whispered something in his ear at the funeral, so seeing him managing West Ham in the final shot wasn't a huge surprise, or at least it was a surprise we'd been set up for. I think this is a great move by the writers, as next season's games between the West Ham and AFC Richmond will be massive grudge matches, with Rupert and Nate taking on our team. I'm not sure it's that plausible that someone that was a kitman just over a year ago could become the manager of a Premier League club, but it's not unheard of for coaches to be promoted to be managers, though it's typically of the club they're already coaching at. It's usually coaches that have had successful playing careers behind them, rather than the guy that used to put the cones out at training. My favourite line in this episode was Danny Rojas when he said "football is life" just before he takes the penalty. I know this is his catchphrase and he said it loads of times before, but I love the way that he says it to settle his nerves before smashing in the crucial penalty. When Ted says, "Unlike Lieutenant Caffey, I can handle the truth," he's making a reference to the film A Few Good Men. Jack Nicholson's character delivers the famous line, "You can't handle the truth," to Tom Cruise's character, who was called Lieutenant Caffey. Beard is reading the book Inverting the Pyramid and has made lots of notes on it, judging by the multicoloured tabs sticking out from its pages. This is at least the second time of him reading this book, as he was reading it on the plane over to England in the pilot episode. I've read the book myself and it's a great read if you're interested in the history of football tactics. I appreciate I've probably made it sound quite boring, but if you like that kind of thing, it's genuinely quite fascinating to read about how the game has changed over the years. Ed mentions the great UCLA basketball coach, John Obi-Wan Gandalf. There's no such coach. He's mixed up the actual UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden, Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, and Gandalf the Wizard from Lord of the Rings. And the quote he gives isn't even from any of those people. It's from Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series. The name of this episode is combined from the book Beard is reading, Inverting the Pyramid, and a poster in Ted's office that's called The Pyramid of Success, which was created by the basketball coach I just mentioned, John Wooden. The poster catches Nate's eye when he's looking around Ted's office. We later find out that's because Nate is looking for the picture he gave to Ted. Nate says to Ted that he doesn't have the photo that he gave him up in his office, but that's because he has it up in his bedroom instead, next to a photo of his son. We saw it there in episode 10, when Ted was getting ready for the funeral, so Ted obviously cherished Nate's gift, even though Nate thought he didn't care about it. When Ted says he'll look like the guy from The Hangover without his mustache, and Beard says Bradley Cooper, this is a joke because Jason Sudeikis is frequently mistaken for the other star of The Hangover, Ed Helms. Apparently fans of The Office have asked Sudeikis for pictures before, and then been embarrassed when they've realised they've got the wrong actor. When Keeley says you've helped this panda become a lion, she's referring back to a conversation she had with Rebecca and Ted in the car park back in the pilot episode, when Keeley asked Ted if he'd rather be a panda or a lion, and Rebecca joined in the conversation and insisted that it was better to be a lion. When Roy says the Diamond Dogs is just chatting about stuff and nothing changes, he's saying almost the same thing that Ted says about girl talk to Rebecca earlier in the season. When Edwin Akufo is waiting for Sam in the physio room, his assistant is practicing his handshakes on the skeleton in the background. No wonder Ted was so impressed by his handshake in the last episode. Practice makes perfect. Things have all been tied up nicely for Season 2 in this episode, but there's loads to think about for Season 3. AFC Richmond are back in the Premier League and will have to cope with a step up in quality. Usually teams that get promoted are expected to struggle in their first season back in the top flight, but at the end of Season 1, Ted promised Rebecca that they would get back to the Premier League, and then the season after they'd win the whole thing. So Ted's ambition was to win the league previously. It'll be interesting to see if they can live up to that. In terms of the characters and their stories, we'll get to see if Rebecca and Sam's romance will be rekindled, or if it was just a short-term thing. The reason Rebecca said she couldn't commit was because she was scared to make herself vulnerable, so it would be a shame if she couldn't get past that. But on the other hand, a club owner having a relationship with one of her star players is a recipe for disaster. I'm really not sure what to expect from Roy and Keeley in the next season either. It felt like there were lots of clues pointing towards their relationship coming to an end in this season, but they were still a couple by the time the end credits rolled around, just about. Whether that lasts is hard to say, as Roy obviously senses that Keeley's life is moving in a direction that needs him in it less and less. And obviously Ted is the star of the show. It's literally named after him, so he'll need to have some sort of story for next season. In the first season, it was mostly about him being a fish out of water and adjusting to relocating to England and his divorce. This second season has covered his battles with his past, and eventually getting therapy to address his inner demons. For the third season, I really don't know what obstacles he'll face. I wonder if it might be an external threat. Or perhaps, with it being widely tipped to be the final season, he might be pulled back to the United States for some reason. Whatever Season 3 has in store, I'm looking forward to making more videos, thinking too much about what's going on, digging into every little detail, and chasing down every reference. I'll be posting Ted Lasso Season 3 videos shortly after each new episode comes out, so please subscribe to make sure you don't miss them. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.